You want to believe you're above tribalism, that you judge people fairly, one person at a time no matter which group they belong to. You're not, and it's not really your fault. Somewhere deep in your evolutionary history, your ancestors needed enemies to survive. Not because they were cruel, because having the right enemies at the right time kept the group alive. This is the strange, uncomfortable psychology of the outsider, and why your brain is still quietly running the same program today, thousands of years after the world that built it disappeared. Start with a basic problem every early human group had to solve. Cooperation is hard. Sharing food, defending territory, raising children together, coordinating a hunt. All of it requires trusting people you didn't necessarily choose to be around. Left to pure self-interest, groups should fall apart constantly. People should cheat, hoard, wander off. So why didn't they? One answer researchers keep returning to involves outside threat. When a group faces a rival group, internal disagreements suddenly matter less. Petty conflicts get set aside almost instantly. People who normally squabble over small things start acting like a single coordinated unit because the stakes just changed completely. Psychologists call this the common enemy effect. And while it isn't unique to humans, humans appear to have built an entire social architecture around it, layering language, ritual, and identity on top of a mechanism that likely predates our species entirely. Anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon spent decades studying the Yanomami people of the Amazon rainforest, and his controversial but influential fieldwork documented how intergroup conflict and alliance building were deeply woven into the fabric of daily social life. Villages formed tight bonds specifically in response to rival villages nearby. Marriages were arranged partly around strategic alliances. The presence of an outside threat wasn't just background noise disrupting an otherwise peaceful existence. It was actively shaping who trusted who married who fought alongside whom, and who counted as family in the first place. Here's the part that should make you slightly uncomfortable. Evolutionary psychologists John Tooby and Leda Cosmides, who helped pioneer the entire field of evolutionary psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara, proposed something they called coalitional psychology. Their argument, built across multiple decades of research, is that your brain evolved specialized mental machinery specifically for detecting group membership and for automatically treating in-group members differently than out-group members, often below the level of conscious awareness entirely. This isn't a personality flaw. It's closer to a factory setting installed by natural selection. Think about how quickly humans form group loyalty over almost nothing at all. Psychologist Henri Tajfel demonstrated this with a series of experiments in the 1970s that became known as the minimal group studies. He divided participants into groups using something as meaningless as a coin flip, or their stated preference between two abstract paintings. No shared history, no real stakes, no logical reason to care. And yet, within minutes, participants began favoring their own randomly assigned group, allocating more rewards to their own team members, and rating members of the other group as less trustworthy, even though the groups had been created moments earlier and meant absolutely nothing. If your brain will manufacture loyalty and suspicion out of a coin flip, imagine what it does when the stakes are real. Now scale that up across genuine survival pressure instead of a psychology experiment. Imagine two small hunter-gatherer bands sharing a limited hunting territory during a lean season. Resources are scarce, and every calorie matters. One band spots unfamiliar figures approaching from across the valley. In that single moment, every ambiguous signal, a raised hand, an unfamiliar walking pace, an unrecognized face, gets instantly interpreted through a lens of threat rather than curiosity. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence gathered by researchers studying small-scale societies suggests that groups quick to correctly identify danger and quick to unify against it consistently outcompeted groups that treated every unfamiliar encounter as neutral until definitively proven otherwise. Hesitation in this environment could be lethal. This is where cooperation and hostility become strange evolutionary partners, almost impossible to fully separate from one another. The very same psychological system that makes you fiercely loyal to your friends, your family, your team, your country, is the exact same system that makes you instinctively suspicious of outsiders. You cannot switch one off without dampening the other. They evolved together, wired into the same underlying neural circuit, because loyalty inward and suspicion outward were, for most of human history, two sides of a single survival strategy. Researcher Mark Van Vogt, a social psychologist who has published extensively on evolutionary leadership and intergroup dynamics, developed what he calls the male warrior hypothesis. His research proposes that intergroup conflict throughout deep human evolutionary history shaped specific psychological patterns, particularly around male coalition building, status competition, in-group bonding rituals, and heightened willingness to take physical risks, specifically when an outside threat appears on the horizon. Van Voogt's cross-cultural research suggests this pattern isn't simply cultural conditioning passed down through storytelling or upbringing. It shows up with striking consistency across widely different societies with little shared cultural contact, in patterns that are genuinely difficult to explain through culture alone. Here's the modern mirror, and it might be the most uncomfortable part of this entire video. You still do this constantly. Not with spears and contested hunting territory, but with almost anything your brain can code as a group boundary. Sports team rivalries that feel personal, even though the outcome affects nothing in your actual life. Political parties that trigger genuine physiological stress responses in controlled studies simply from viewing an opposing party's messaging. Regional identities, school rivalries, even something as trivial as competing phone brands or gaming console preferences can trigger a measurable flicker of in-group loyalty and out-group suspicion. Because the underlying machinery doesn't actually care what the group is about. It only cares that a line has been drawn somewhere and that you've been placed on one side of it. Social media makes all of this measurably worse, not better. Researchers studying online engagement patterns have repeatedly found that algorithms optimized purely for attention have learned, whether by deliberate design or simple trial and error. That outrage directed at an outgroup holds attention far longer than nuance or agreement ever does. Every single time you feel that quick surge of solidarity with people who already agree with you, and that quick flash of suspicion toward people who don't, you are watching genuinely ancient coalitional psychology get triggered by a completely modern stimulus it was never built or designed to handle. None of this means conflict is good, or that tribalism should be quietly embraced as some kind of natural virtue. If anything, understanding exactly where this instinct comes from is the first real step toward not being silently controlled by it. Once you know your brain is running an ancient threat detection program that was built for small hunting bands facing genuine survival stakes, you can start noticing the exact moments when it misfires in situations that don't actually call for it at all. A disagreement with a stranger online, an unfamiliar accent or appearance, triggering unearned unease, a sports rivalry that poses precisely zero real threat to your safety or your future. Your ancestors needed enemies because the alternative was disorganized, undefended, and dangerously vulnerable. Groups that could quickly identify a genuine threat and rally together against it tended to survive long enough to reproduce. Groups that couldn't often simply didn't. You inherited that exact wiring, fully intact, thousands of generations later. Every time you feel your guard instinctively rise around an unfamiliar group, every time a rivalry feels far more personal than the actual stakes justify, every time you catch yourself quietly assuming the worst about someone simply because they stand on the other side of some invisible, often arbitrary line. That reaction isn't a flaw in your character. That's a survival tool, built for a small, dangerous, resource-scarce world that no longer exists, still running quietly and automatically in the background of a brain that genuinely hasn't caught up to how safe you actually are. You want to believe you're above tribalism. You're not. But now you know exactly why, and knowing that might be the one real advantage your ancestors never had.